Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today we're going over my picks for the top 10 American cars in Grand Theft Auto Online. Now these aren't really getting ranked in terms of anything, these are just really 10 American cars that I think are really good. Obviously, as usual, performance will sort of have an effect on where they place in this ranking and whether or not they are actually on the list. Anyway guys, let's get into it. We're going to go ahead and start off with number 10. To start this list off, we have the regular Cockette. Now this is a car that you can get for very cheap at the very bottom of Legendary Motorsport. This thing goes for about $130,000, and for that price, you get a pretty decent little sports car. Now I've always been a big fan of the Cockette. In fact, it was the first car that I actually bought for myself in Grand Theft Auto Online, so it kind of holds a bit of a special place. For me at least. Now the Cockette handles well, it has decent acceleration, it has an okay top speed. You're not going to win any races with it because of course it is an OG vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online, so performance wise, I mean, there are better cars, but as a car for cruising around in free mode or to take to car shows, the Cockette is pretty decent. It's got quite a bit of customization actually, a surprising amount for how old it is. Overall, it's just a very good little sports car, and especially for being how cheap it is, you really can't go wrong with buying one of these things. Obviously, it's based off of a Corvette C7, so I think it definitely is an American car, and it definitely deserves to be on this list. So that's it for number 10. Let's move on to number 9. Next up at number 9, we have the Declassy Granger 3600LX from the Contract DLC. Now this thing is relatively cheap. It is the cheapest Imani Tech vehicle that you can get, coming in at just over $1 million. Now the Granger is not the greatest performing vehicle, however I definitely feel like it is deserving of being on this list because it's based off of a Chevy Suburban or a Cadillac Escalade ESV, so those are definitely two very American cars. Now the Granger, I know, is also not technically a car, it's an SUV, or you could even maybe call it a truck, even though I would disagree with you, but if you wanted to, I mean, you could. Obviously this thing has Imani Tech like I mentioned before, which allows you to put on a missile lock-on jammer, which is a very useful thing to have in Grand Theft Auto Online. We have these pesky guys flying around on Mark IIs, and it is nice to be able to not get locked onto by them. Performance-wise, I mean, it sucks. It's actually, I think it's actually slower than the regular Granger. I remember that being a thing when this thing first came out, that the old Granger is actually faster than this thing, but the old Granger also doesn't have Imani Tech or equipable machine guns, or an equipable oil slick proximity mine dropper, or a snorkel, or this much customization, or armor plating. Really, the 3600 is just better in every single way except for maybe performance. Anyway guys, that's it for the Granger 3600LX. It's definitely an American vehicle, and it's definitely deserving of being on this list, I think. So that's it for number 9. Let's move on to number 8. Next up at number 8, we have the Gauntlet Classic Custom. Now this thing is definitely an American car. It's based heavily off of either the Plymouth Superbird or the Dodge Charger Daytona. Obviously, I've gone for the Charger Daytona look on mine, or maybe it's not obvious, but I've decided to, at least in my mind. Now in order to make this thing, you need to take a Gauntlet Classic, go to Benny's and upgrade it into the Gauntlet Classic Custom. Once you do this, it will get a bit of a speed boost, a little tiny bit of a performance upgrade, and it will pretty much be a rocket ship in a straight line. However, cornering, of course, is not going to be its strongest suit. However, it's not that bad, so just be warned. I mean, it's not going to be as grippy as, say, an Italia GTO, but I mean, it's still, you know, it's pretty manageable, I gotta say. So obviously, very much based off of American vehicles, definitely handles like an American car, that's for sure. Overall, very good vehicle. Definitely recommend picking one of these up. It's got tons and tons of customization. You really cannot go wrong with this thing. You won't win any races, but it definitely is an American car, and that's why it's here. So that's it for number 8. Let's move on to number 7. Next up, we have the Albany Vstr at number 7. This is one of my favorite cars in Grand Theft Auto Online for many different reasons, and before we get any further into this, there are people that think that this thing looks like a Mercedes S-Class, and I'm just going to shut those people down right now. This is definitely based off of a Cadillac CTS-V in real life. I mean, it's literally called the VSTR, which is like, you know, almost the same letters and, you know, set up a little differently, but I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that this thing is pretty heavily based off the Cadillac. I can sort of see a little bit of Mercedes here and there, like maybe the headlights, for example, but other than that, I really cannot see any Mercedes in this vehicle, so I'm going to go ahead and say that this is a Cadillac CTS-V in real life. Now back to the VSTR, I mean, this thing does cost quite a bit of money. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 or $1.7 million, which is pretty insane. And actually, right after I said that, I do believe that it's actually about $1.3 million, so forgive me for those mishaps there. The VSTR is very, very quick in a straight line. It's actually got pretty decent handling as well, I gotta say. I feel like that's one of this car's most underrated and underappreciated features, is that it actually handles really well. Obviously, it's a four-door vehicle as well. That poor motorcycler. Oh, that sucks. But what I really, really enjoy about the Albany Vstr in GTA Online is the insane rolling burnouts that you can do with this thing. You can double clutch this car so goddamn easily. I don't understand. Like, it's just ridiculous. If you don't know how to double clutch, you basically just spam the handbrake when you're about to shift gears. And with this car, I feel like you can just do it like whenever you want, like just spam the handbrake and it's just gonna start drifting. So drifting with the VSTR, also getting into an uncontrolled rolling burnout is pretty fun with this thing as well. VSTR, definitely an American car, definitely deserving of being on this list. If you disagree, honestly, I don't have anything more to say to you, so exit the video right now. Next up, we have a car that I talk about in, I swear to God, every other video. It's of course the Bravado Gauntlet Hellfire. Now, those of you who view my channel very regularly, you're probably getting sick of me talking about this vehicle and how fun it is. So I'm just gonna say, I mean, it's based off of a Dodge Challenger Hellcat in real life. You could say it's the wide body, you could say it's the Demon, you could say it's the Red Eye. It's a Hellcat, it's a wide body Hellcat. That's all there is to it. This thing is a blast to drive. You can do rolling burnouts just as easily as the VSTR in this thing, maybe even easier, I would honestly argue. Obviously an American car based off of the Dodge Challenger, like I said. Got tons of customization, super fun to drive, super fast in a straight line, cannot corner to save its life. It's a great car. I love this thing. One of my favorite cars in GTA Online as well. I am a pretty big fan of most of the American vehicles, so long as they are either fun or handle well. Obviously, if they don't handle well, they have to be fun. So this thing is definitely that. Anyway, guys, that is it for number 6. Let's move on to number 5. Next up, we have the Invetero Cockette D10. So the second Cockette of the list, obviously, Cockette Corvette is based off of an American car. Now, this thing is obviously based off of the Corvette C8 in real life, which is definitely an American car. I think we can probably all agree on that. Now, the Cockette D10 is not as fast as maybe I would have hoped that it actually would be. However, that's not to say that it is slow. I mean, this thing is very quick in a straight line. It also has pretty decent handling as well. It is within the sports car category, so that's probably why it has semi-decent handling. Now, the handling could be better, do not get me wrong, please. It's definitely, there's definitely room for improvement, but I do like this car quite a lot. Definitely looks absolutely amazing. Rockstar's copyright infringement team, they knocked it out of the park on this thing. As far as I can tell, the only thing that's different about this versus the real C8 is that vent on the side of the car is upside down on this one versus the one in real life. The D10 truly is an awesome American car in GTA Online. Definitely one that I feel like is actually pretty overlooked, believe it or not. I'm sure there's going to be quite a few of you guys in the comments down below who have D10s, but I feel like generally by the community, like, you never really see people driving this thing, whereas you see them driving, you know, other vehicles. Maybe it's just performance-wise, this thing's not good enough for their standards. Maybe it's something else, I'm not really sure. But what I do know is that the D10 is a really fun vehicle to drive, and you guys should definitely pick one up if you don't have one already. That's it for the Cockette D10 at number 5. Let's move on to number let's move on to number 4. Next up at number 4, we have the Vapid Bullet. Now, I honestly was going to place the Vapid FMJ here, but then I realized I don't actually have a Vapid FMJ anymore. So I did have a Bullet, so I'm improvising. And honestly, this thing definitely deserves to be a number 4 anyways, because it's based off of the 2005 Ford GT in real life, which is a very cool and very sought after car these days. And it's definitely American. Now, the Bullet, you're not going to win any races in GTA Online, let's be honest. This thing is in the supercars category, and it was added with the game when it came out in 2013. Now, that's not to say that the Bullet is a bad car, though. This thing actually has phenomenal handling, and it comes in at $155,000. So for that price, I mean, you might as well buy 10 of them. I mean, it's such a good car. Unfortunately, there is absolutely zero customization on the Vapid Bullet other than just like rims and like window tint and the headlights. So that is a real shame. The Bullet could be so damn cool if it had more customization options. So Rockstar, hey, if you're watching this video, please, for the love of God, add more customization options to this vehicle. It definitely deserves them. But yeah, guys, I mean, for 155k, the Bullet is definitely a car that I feel like you can't really go wrong with. This thing is pretty awesome. I actually really like the look of this vehicle as well. I know it's not for everybody, but me personally, I think it's a great looking car. Definitely handles incredibly well, accelerates decently for what it is. I mean, it's got an okay top speed. Overall, I mean, it's just a car that you buy just to kind of have and maybe take to a car meet every once in a while and just, you know, drive around in free mode and try to enjoy it. Overall, the Bullet, definitely a very cool car. And the Vapid FMJ is also a very cool car. I was going to talk about it, like I said, but just didn't have one in my garage anymore, so kind of my bad, you know? Anyway, guys, that's it for number 4. Let's move on to number 3. On today's episode of HarmNone Talks about the Bravado Buffalo Stx, of course, we have at number 3, the Bravado Buffalo Stx. Now, I know those of you who watch my channel, again, with this car and the Hellfire, I know you're probably sick of this, so I'm going to keep it short. This thing is absolutely amazing. It's at the top of the muscle cars category in Grand Theft Auto Online. It's based off of a Dodge Charger Hellcat, or Scat Pack in real life. I'd more say that it's based off of the Scat Pack, but to each their own. It has incredibly good handling, very good acceleration, a pretty good top speed, lots of customization options, a Monty Tech, an armor upgrade, a proximity mine oil slick dropper upgrade. It's also got a dual front-mounted machine guns, I should say, and they are really, really good. You can destroy other vehicles with complete ease with these things. It's also a 4-seater, so you can carry some of your friends around. It's very fast, it's definitely American. Overall, that's pretty much it for the Bravado Buffalo Stx, and it's time to move on. Record time, boys, let's go. Next up at number 2, we have the Vapid Dominator Asp. This thing was formerly the fastest muscle car in the game before the Tuners DLC vehicles got nerfed when the Contract DLC came out. However, that's not to say that this car is bad now. It is still within the top 3 fastest muscle cars around a track in Grand Theft Auto Online, which is pretty impressive. In a straight line, this thing was an absolute demon. It still is pretty damn good in a straight line. But what this thing really gave it such prowess in the muscle cars category when it came to racing was this thing's handling ability. And I can confirm that the handling has not changed very much even post-nerf. The ASP still handles incredibly well, it's still incredibly fast, and you're probably not going to win any muscle cars races with this thing, but you'll definitely get pretty close. It does have absolute tons of customization because it did come out with the Tuners DLC, like I mentioned. So there's lots and lots that you could do to this thing to make it unique and make it your own. The ASP is one of my favorite cars in Grand Theft Auto Online, definitely my favorite Vapid car, and it is entirely based off of early 2000s Ford Mustangs. So definitely a cool one, definitely one that you guys should pick up. Anyway guys, that is it for number 2. Let's move on to the number 1 American car in Grand Theft Auto Online. And the number 1 American car in Grand Theft Auto Online is the Vapid Dominator Gtt. Now this thing is at the number 1 spot for a pretty good reason, I feel like. Obviously it is based off of a Ford Mustang, and if you didn't know, the Ford Mustang was pretty much the original muscle car. Now you can say that the original Mustang came with only a V6, whatever. It really was the first muscle car in America. And for that reason, I think that it is definitely deserving of being in the number 1 spot. Now I know that this thing is more so based off of like a 1967 to a 69 Mustang. However, I do feel like it is one of the OG Mustangs from the 60s, so it's pretty deserving of being in the number 1 spot in my opinion. On top of that, it's also relatively cheap, going for about $900,000. On top of that, it actually handles remarkably well. It's pretty quick, and it was the 2nd fastest muscle car in Grand Theft Auto Online before the Contract DLC came out and all of the Tuners DLC vehicles were nerfed. So the Dominator Gtt is a great car. It's got tons of customization because it came out with the Tuners DLC. It looks amazing, it sounds pretty good, drives nicely. Really, there's nothing wrong with this thing. And no, it's not my favorite Dominator in GTA Online. Like I said, the ASP is my favorite. However, I do genuinely feel like this is the most deserving of all of the American cars to be at the top of this list. Now you can argue with me all you want. I know there's some Mopar guys in my comments. I know there's some Chevy guys as well. So feel free to state your own opinion in the comments down below. Luckily, this is not one of my tier lists, so you are actually allowed to have your own opinion. Anyway guys, there you have it. Those are the top 10 American cars in Grand Theft Auto Online, selected by me. If you guys enjoyed this video, if you learned something, a like is of course appreciated. If not, dislike. Subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.